Welcome to Tip Tuesday. This is Will Twentyman, and I'm going to talk about specifications versus extended attributes today. So we're going to adjust the screen a little bit. So both of these are areas that look like they can be really good when you want just a little bit of extra data on your equipment. And so, you used up all your lab fields, you used up all your custom fields, and you just need a few more pieces of information, or you've got something special going on. So we've got attributes and specifications, and both of these can look like good places to put extra data. So a valid question that comes up is, what's the difference? What should I use them for? I think the first thing we should start about is a little history lesson. So, attributes started out back in the day as extended attributes that were properties of the add-edited attributes. So, for example, if I go to attribute types in Pipette, I've got a whole bunch of extended attributes. On balance, I've got a different set of extended attributes. And so those were introduced a long time ago to add information related to certain types of equipment. So a digital multimeter would have one set of attributes, a caliper might have something else, a pipette could have something else, and so it gives you equipment-specific extra information. And this has since been extended so that we now have company-wide attributes and even system-wide attributes. And what's really good about these is they integrate well with the event configuration. So event attributes can read and write from these extended attributes very easily. And so these have a lot of good use. By contrast, specifications were originally uncertainty attributes. So these were historically meant to contain information about instruments that was useful for uncertainty calculations. And the different types that we had are formulas, which you'd use a script to calculate your results, a lookup where it's just grab a value, and tables. And the tables were really, you'd have a table name and then a whole bunch of options where if you're in this parameter range, you get this output, this parameter range gets this output, and you just have one parameter. Unfortunately, with electronic instruments, you have things like voltage and frequency for AC volts, or voltage and current for AC current. So we extended that concept, and so now we have tables that have unlimited depth, lots of different parameters supported. But for the most part, it's still oriented around uncertainty calculations, and we have further extended that. So we now have the specification module where you can define specifications of equipment. Fluke 5500 or whatever you want to talk about, we've got the ability to define those known properties. So and these are going to be extended in the near future, even with sets to support gauge block sets, pin gauge sets, so on and so forth. So the key thing here is because these tables can be extended, and I can give you an example here. You can have these tables go down multiple nodes, and that's also very nice. So what's the difference? The biggest difference is extended attributes are by nature structured. You have a name. That name cannot be repeated. That name contains a specific type of information. So whether it's a memo, a piece of text, a number with a certain number of digits available, it's very, very structured. And so each attribute has a unique name, contains one piece of data. By contrast, specifications, you can repeat names. You've got somewhat free flow data, and you can do it very ad hoc. So I can here I've got one scale that has one port on it. If I go to scale 2, now I've got multiple ports. So it's much more free form, much more flexible, and that's also useful. However, it doesn't work nearly as well with event configuration. It only really is designed to work tightly with the uncertainty module itself. For those of you who have scripting access, we have scripting functions that make it very easy to interact with event attributes. Working with specifications takes a little bit more work. So a valid question comes up and it's like, well, what's the difference? So let's go back to our pipette. The pipette module, the history of it is a good example of the differences. So back when we started the pipette module, we didn't have specifications yet. We had the old uncertainty attributes. And so what we did is we used attributes. And so you can see here I've got a number of attributes. So we've got the mode, number of samples 2, so on and so forth. Everything's very nicely structured, works well, great. And back in the day, the configuration of the balance was associated with the user, not with the balance itself. When we started going to the balances, then here, we did a similar thing. And let me see if I can find a balance that's configured. Here we've got a balance. We had a balance, it would auto commit 9600 baud, 8 data bits. Very simple. Life is wonderful. And then we discovered there were weird balances that they had 12 Wayne cells, and each Wayne cell was connected to its own RS-232 adapter. Oops. We could have continued this process and said, okay, we're going to have scale baud 1, scale baud 2, scale baud 3, up to 12. That was an option, but that would have made things much more difficult. And at some point, you're going to have a 16-port balance with 16 RS-232. It became difficult. And so what we did is we moved to the specifications, precisely because I could make as many port nodes as I wanted, and I could number them 1, 2, 3, 4. And so because it's free form and not rigid, I could be more flexible. You can see I've still got the information about auto commit. I've now got a device type to tell me what it is. And you can more easily see back on the pipette that I've got very similar data, whether it's in specifications or attributes. It's almost exactly the same. The structure's similar. So the question then becomes, which one should you use? And it really comes down to, in this case, I've got on attributes, very structured information. It works really well with event config. So, this information only exists if the attribute type is pipette. I can then use The fact that the attribute type is pipette in workflow config to make sure pipettes are run by one event, non-pipettes are run by a different event, it gives me lots and lots of control. Specifications doesn't marry in nearly as tightly, but it's more flexible. So for example, in the pipette module on my balances, I need certain pieces of information. Well, we could create a balance module. And the balance module needs more pieces of information. And then we could have a weights module, and the weights module requires balances to have more pieces of information. And so as that information grows, if I'm working with attributes, that starts to become painful because you've got all of these different modules fighting on how they want to define a balance. With specifications, I can just make more nodes. This is the pipette node, this is the balance node, this is the weights node, and it gives us flexibility to have what we want where we want it. But as mentioned earlier, updating these specifications from an event requires custom rules. So any kind of work with these, there's just no native support for easily updating this information from an event. And a lot of times what you really want is on the receiving event, these are the accessories. Gather it in the event, push it to the equipment, show it in following events. This is, pick a various pieces of information. The event attributes tie in with the equipment attributes. And so the answer to your question is not going to be definitely one, definitely the other. The answer to your question is, what else are you going to do with this data? And how are you going to control it? I hope this has been informative, and have a good day.